And today we have a presentation and interactions with a company called C3 Presents. You've probably seen it in the program, but I'll highlight a few things. C3 Presents produced the 2021 U.S. Presidential Inauguration and featured thousands of flags on the mall. And that's the focus of the presentation today. And C3 Presents handles some of the world's, if not the world's, largest music festivals. They have a great deal of experience doing those kinds of events, specifically Austin City Limits Music Festival in Texas and Lollapalooza in Chicago, along with its 6 international editions. They handle millions of music lovers annually, and headquartered out of Austin, Texas. They handle about 1,100 or so concerts annually at a wide variety of locations. Today we have the Chief Operating Officer, Emmett Beliveau, and the Director of Experience, Jason Dudley, who will be joining us today and providing visual as well as voiceover inputs to give you the inside look at the Inauguration Day mall display. And let's turn it over to them for their visual presentation first, and then we'll go to questions and answers after.
Well, thanks for having us. This is really an honor for Jason and I to join you all, and it's been a lot of fun for us to relive this installation over the last couple of weeks as we prepared to share this with you. So thanks for allowing us that privilege. Well, great. Well, I'm Emmett, and Jason is here with me, and we thought we would just take you through the deck, which shows some of the finished product, but also some of the in-process photos and videos to give you a sense of our thinking and what we were trying to accomplish and how it all came together. Jason is going to keep me honest with a lot of the details and numbers and dimensions, because he was the one responsible for sourcing it all and getting it all installed up in DC. But as Stan said, as way of background, C3 is primarily a major music festival production. We're based here in Austin, and we do music festivals all across the world. So typically our involvement with flags is somewhat limited. We do display them on our main stage. This is probably the most terrifying moment I've experienced at the company. I've been here 6 years. This was in 2015 when a young man named Tyler Joseph, who's the front man of a band called 21 Pilots, scaled a piece of supporting truss to the top of the stage, which is about 6 feet wide, and then stood on another piece, stood on an I-beam, which is itself about 6 feet wide. And while standing next to the Texas flag, this was here in Austin, sang some of his songs. The crowd loved it. It terrified us. We presented that flag to Tyler after the presentation, after the festival, and it's a 2-weekend festival. And we said, you have to sign a waiver to make sure that you won't do that on weekend 2. And he did, and he didn't climb it weekend 2. So the only other flag related concert thing I thought I would open with was Sir Paul McCartney, who also played Austin City Limits Music Festival here in Austin. And at the end of his set, came out, with a triumphant ode to his Austin, Texas crowd. I assume you guys have already figured out what is wrong with this photo. Anyone? That is not the Texas flag. That is the flag of the nation of Chile. Remarkably close. I don't think anyone saw it in the moment. I quickly confirmed that it was not the C3 staff that presented McCartney with the flag, but it was thankfully the McCartney Roadshow, so it wasn't on us. We do a major festival in Santiago, so we did have some fun with it and said, well, maybe this is a hint to our crowd that Sir Paul is going to be playing Lollapalooza Santiago. So even in our little music festival world, we've had a few brush-ins with some major flag controversy, and there's actually a bit of reporting on this one if you want to Google it. But to the topic at hand. So this is one of the shots looking from the west towards the nation's capital of the finished product. And we're going to take you panel by panel through the design and the installation of the field of flags. How on earth did this music festival company end up being asked to participate in this? And it is pretty random. And it's because of my background. I had the privilege of working for President Obama, both on his campaign back in 2007 and 2008, and then at the White House for him. In between the campaign and the administration back in 2009, I was the CEO of his inaugural committee. So that is the team that plans all of the non-swearing-in events, what happens on the mall, the balls, the parades, all the various military displays that happen in DC surrounding the inauguration. And typically, part of that is having the public on the National Mall, starting at about 3rd Street, as far back as those crowds go. And that is something that's at C3, because of their music festival experience, had been involved in supporting even back in 2009. So the company was providing fencing and porta potties and the audio support so that folks standing on the mall could hear what was happening up at the Capitol, and big video screens and all that sorts of stuff. Fast forward to this past year, the Biden team decided very early on that because of the ongoing pandemic, they did not want to have a large crowd on the mall, but wanted to find a way in this unique year to honor the event in a way that had never been done. It was planned in very short order. I wanted to show you what Jason and I looked like for the weeks that we spent in January. COVID precautions in place and heat precautions in place. It was pretty chilly. This is what the final design looked like. This is our computer-aided design overlaid onto some Google Earth imagery of the mall. And we really didn't engage with the Biden team until well into December. As you all remember, it was not the cleanest or most non-controversial presidential transitions that we've had. So the inaugural planning really was delayed, both because of President Trump's position, but also because of the pandemic. And so they weren't really planning the inaugural starting on November 5th, like historically happened. So it was mid-December before we engaged with them, coming up against holiday deadlines. And we went back and forth on a design process about how we could fill this space on the mall. We talked about video installations and video screens and moving animation and all sorts of stuff, and came back to what we think was a very elegant and quite simple, if not at great scale, demonstration. And so you can see, moving from the right of your screen to the left, the Capitol is on the far right. The first panel, we used a large flag, which Jason will give some detail about. And then we did the second panel, which was the only display of 3x5 sized flags on their poles and in a major ground installation to hold those up. We didn't know what we were going to have for weather on Inauguration Day. We ended up facing almost 30 knot gusts of wind. So we're very glad that we went with the robust support and anchoring system for the flags that we did. And then starting on that third panel where it says small state flags, we displayed a display of flags from all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the US territories in precedence order of when they entered the Union, which had the beautiful symmetry of starting with Delaware, the home state of the president-elect. So we really couldn't have planned that any better. So with this in mind, I'm going to try to show a brief video which takes us through the installation, includes some news clips, and in a few places what we've tried to do is take this design graphic that you've seen and show you the actual next to it. So here's hoping you can hear and see this.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help you God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
the sky above Washington, pillars of light. On the ground, a field of flags, nearly 200,000 of them.
It's intended to represent the American people and to unify the country.
They're inviting us to project ourselves into that crowd and feel as somehow we're more than just passive participants in this.
All of it to show the American people that we're thinking about them in this time.
That asks a lot of a temporary art installation. But we're a country in need of a lot just now.
All right. Well, why don't we start then with starting from the east, working to the west. This is affectionately known, we named it the super flag. Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you found it, the dimensions, how we put it in, etc.
Okay, this flag is from a company out of Utah called 50 Star Productions, and it's 150 feet by 300 feet. It's in 13 separate pieces. The stripes are separate, so 14, and then the union is separate. This is normally used in parades, football games, Army-Navy game. Is the very first time that it was presented flat, and we built a structure for this so we could get it up high enough to have the overhead shot from this swearing in so you could see it. The thing is the wind that Emmett was talking about. This was the scariest, you can't really tell, but in this picture, but there is a ton of crew hiding under this flag and around this flag, behind these press booths, hiding for it. The worst fear was if a big gust of wind came in the middle of the swearing in and we lost this flag. So it's down and it's tight, but there's a lot of people on standby.
And you can actually, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you can see some sandbags that we pulled off that were holding some fence down. That's why they're yellow. We spray painted those blue and black and red and white before the next morning. We had a lot of ballast on this flag. Jason mentioned, and I know some folks were asking, why the big flag in this first panel? And as Jason mentioned, it really was for this shot. You know, we knew that in that iconic picture looking back west from the west front of the Capitol during the swearing-in ceremony, that at that scale, most of what was on the mall would be lost, and we'd have to go very large scale for that to render in the photo. And you can see we achieved it here. We know that vertically that the field of stars should be on the other side, but the entire display was kind of oriented horizontally to the south. So that was a debate point. But we went back and forth so that it would align with the other U.S. outline that was in there. So moving down, this is that platform that Jason mentioned, which was a feat in itself because the mall is not flat. The mall is rounded for drainage from the center out, cascading down, and our staging vendor, and these are the same folks that we use at music festivals, were able to put in the scaff base and keep that level, then decking on top of it, as you see in the right photo. And
the front edge of this scaffolding was 8 feet and the back edge was 4.5.
Yeah, so some real distance. So these are just some photos of just to get the scale of the installation, as even folks working across it and on it, you know, it really did look like ants as we stitched it together and then reinforced it over several days. You probably see from the photo, it's pretty quiet. We started our load in the day after the Capitol attack. So we were under tremendous security that increased almost with every passing day, well within the security cordon that was expanding as the weeks progressed towards the inauguration. It really was kind of a lonely time to be down in the mall. It was just our couple hundred crew down there working on this. We ended up being surrounded and protected by members of the Texas National Guard, which was a lot of fun for us to have the team there from our home state. So Jason, why don't we touch on the 3x5 mall panel? Okay,
so the original count was 4,250 of these flags were ordered. In this panel, we used 3,996. So the tricky part was this is explaining to all the labor that flag protocol had to be followed. So normally when you have a lot of stagehands, things are hitting the ground. None of that could happen. during this. I could not have a US flag touch the ground. Also, all poles we had an assembly line, all 4,000 poles had to have 2 holes drilled in them because I needed to all have them hit the same spot on the scaffolding. So all the flags were the exact same height.
Yeah, so you guys will see that in the build photos here. So the solution from our production team here was to use the very first layer of typical building or staging scaffolding. So this is what you would see a construction site would build higher. We just stopped at the first layer. And as Jason mentioned, we drilled on site all those thousands of poles to have a washer and screw at the bottom. So as they were dropped into each pole, they stopped at that level spot. This is how the installation happened. We knew that we could reach the first row by hand, but to reach into the inner rows of each one between the walkways, our team used big kind of grabber hands to get it up and then drop it in. And this again took dozens of people days to handle the installation. And then after we were done walking up and down the walkways, we scrimmed that up and dressed it. There you can see the green is down so that the effect from above and from the side was focused on the flags. These are more flags going in.
And also we chose the green scrim to allude to the lawn. Normally we would use black, but.
And here it is looking back towards the monument. So this was a special piece that we did in the middle of the mall. This outline of the U.S. Was done was rendered in our plans, as you saw, and then we brought out GPS positioning so that we could have a very accurate outline of the shape. And then we discovered, and then implemented the same method that we'd used to install all the flags, which was one row at a time, working from the east to the west, which you'll see in some of the photos. We debated about whether we should try to represent each state with their specific flags. We thought that might get lost, and you would only end up seeing a few of the definition of a few of the larger states. So we introduced the highly technical term of flag salad, and this is the flag salad. And Jason was the head chef of the flag salad. Why don't you talk a little bit about where did you find these flags, Jason? How did you get them, and how did you make the salad?
Okay, well, first I want to say I work with the most creative people. So they, the higher ups, Emmett and his team decided on this, and we were chosen to do this event. Unfortunately, now I was stuck with procuring everything. So it was important. Every single flag was made in the US, every single flag, which was a challenge, just FYI, but it was very important to us and to the inauguration. We have them here in state order by, like Emmett said, how they were inducted into the Union. The most important flag this year, as you all know, was the Mississippi flag. I think is in the next slide. We all know that it changed in 2020. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of finances. So no flag company had actually made the new Mississippi flag yet. So I had to find a vendor that could, in 1 week, get me all Mississippi flags, the new one. And I did. This is us figuring out our template. Each flag was 18 inches by 18 inches apart. And we also had to pray and pray and pray that we did not have a freeze, because this is the most protected lawn in the country. So we can't just drill into it, put holes in it, kill the grass. So we prayed to not have a freeze, and luckily we didn't.
And this is how it went in. It was manual, folks, kind of back-breaking, back-bending work, down on one knee, placing it in. If you pushed too hard, the thin dowel snapped. If you didn't push hard enough, it didn't get deep enough. We told the Park Service it was a free large-scale aeration of the National Mall. Here's the flag line in action. So you can see we pulled a measuring tape from one side, from the north of the mall to the south of the mall. We had a crew chief who worked from the left that made sure that each line was 18 inches out. And then to the right, you see our stagehand and labor crew. We had about 50 to 60 people on each installation line at one time. Once the tape was set, everyone stepped forward and placed about 2 flags at that 18-inch distance, using the flag in front of it as a marker. And then we'd yell, "Move the line," which has become a company rallying cry of "move the line," and down we would step through the mall. There's another view. I think that's the Mississippi flag you were mentioning, Jason.
Correct.
With the crew chief to our back and the installation crew facing us as we worked our way towards the Washington Monument. Here's a couple views. We were privileged to get a photographer up in the Washington Monument. So this is from the Washington Monument, right? I think this was the day before the inauguration. So we were essentially done with the setup. The other quick elements that were there on the mall, as you see the tents on the right and left, those were broadcast positions. Those were where many of the networks, CNN, NBC, MSNBC, Fox, were broadcasting from. So if you saw folks going live from the mall with the flags as their backdrop, I think we built 30 of those. And that's what those were along the side. I'll show you where we ran out of time a bit on the right picture at the bottom, the last panel, which is all the way just east of 14th Street now. So this installation filled from 3rd until 14th Street in DC. We were running out of time. And so as you can see, we increased the spacing in that last panel just so that we could get it done. That was a panel of just the US small flags. So no individual state or territory was shorted in their count. And then as we wrap up here, I just want to let Jason, why don't you speak a little bit to the larger flags that really play beautifully in this photo along the right.
Yeah, these flags are, just to answer one question, the small flags, when we say small, they're 12 inches by 18 inches and a 31.5-inch dowel that is 5/12 inch thick. Sorry, Emmett, a couple of people are asking the size. We were only allowed to put a 1/4 inch hole in the National Mall. So I had to find a dowel that was smaller than a 1/4 inch. Now these flags here we did 2 for every state and territory and DC. So these are 112, they're 8 foot by 12 foot. Our original plan was to do a 3-point installation, 2 at the top and 1 on the flagpole. But like Emmett said, the wind was crazy. So we had to lose the 3rd pinpoint on the pole just for wind. We couldn't risk a flag in the middle of an inauguration being ripped. So you'll see them on the live coverage of the inauguration. They're flowing nicely. Sometimes they ended completely horizontal to the ground, but that's how windy it was.
But just gives you a sense of the scale of this installation. These were big flags. I think our poles, were they 40-foot poles?
They're 42-foot poles.
42-foot poles. And then again, just looking back towards the Capitol at the end, we weren't responsible for the flags on the Capitol itself. That is done by the Congressional Inaugural Committee. I believe it's a team here in Texas, actually, that's done it, I think, since the Bush administration. But I believe that wraps it up, and we're happy to take questions. Stan, however you'd like to run it, if we have time.
You bet. We've got a billion of them. So, so let me with the time we've got left, let me go through some here. Seems to be that one of the most popular questions is what happened to them after everything was done? Where'd they all go?
A great question. I'm going to use this to help illustrate it a bit. So they went a variety of places. Unintentionally, and really what I think was one of the coolest pieces of this is if your eyes are excellent, you will see that just above that last panel on the bottom right, there is a fence line right in front of that green scissor lift there. So that last fence line was actually outside of our original perimeter. It was well within the greater security perimeter, but it wasn't in the innermost one. So on inauguration day, and the next day, as the security cordon was lifted, that last panel was essentially open to the public. It was still thousands of flags. And it was in the morning, we had kind of people sheepishly coming by and looking, you know, can I grab one of these? And we, after a few minutes, fully embraced it and put some staff out there and said, please take some. And so that panel was picked clean by folks that were in DC in the most kind of uplifting sense of community we'd ever seen. It wasn't people taking bunches of them. It was onesies and twosies. That's where that whole panel went. We also had a fair amount of custom requests where people would come up to our fence line and say, we're visiting from Alabama or we're from Iowa. Any chance I could get one? And if our team could handle it, they would run up to the field and pull one of the small ones from that state and give it to those folks. We believe that the inaugural committee gave those larger flags, the larger state flags that were on the perimeter, to the U.S. senators from those states as a gift from President Biden. The White House took a good number of the flags and were distributing them to supporters of the inaugural, folks who had contributed financially to the inaugural. And then I believe the remainder of them went to the DC public school system, who was working on using them in an education environment. So they all were rehomed in some way. We were very focused on how to do this and do it properly. None of them were destroyed or burned at the end.
Wow, that's a phenomenal story, and terrific to hear that so many of them went to educational purposes. So
we did see a bunch show up on eBay. So they may still be, and it is very possible that it is a legit flag, especially on the last panel.
If you hear a whole bunch of keyboards clicking, it's because people are probably now, while they're watching, they're going on eBay.
I'll show you one. I've got one. We did get from the inaugural committee 200 of the 3x5s. That we presented to our staff, everyone and all of our vendors and everyone that worked the gig in these nice walnut boxes. So we all do have a pretty treasured keepsake. It's here in my office displayed.
Wow, that's terrific. I know we don't have much time left, but very quickly, just in general terms, could you say again, how much time did you have from when you were told go to Inauguration Day? Sounded like you had maybe a month and a half.
Oh, I wish. We wish it was a month. No, I think we signed the final agreement and agreed on the budget just before Christmas. I think it was December 22nd or 3rd.
Wow.
And Jason had been talking to vendors for maybe a week or two at that point. But, you know, remember, this was a devastating year for our company, for many in the production industry. So until we could say, go, money's on the way. And yes, we need it delivered over 2 holidays in DC between Christmas and New Year's for an installation that was going to begin on January 7th. It was tight.
Wow. Again, an incredible story, and thank you so much to both of you for taking time out on a weekend, busy business, and sharing the story, the pictures, the inside look. There's just dozens and dozens of questions here that we just can't get to. But we do really appreciate you taking the time and sharing the story with us about an incredible event as a whole, but also specifically for folks like us that our specific interest is what you guys did. Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to do it. And my email is just emmett.beliveau@gmail. If folks have questions, I'm happy to try to get through them. Thanks so much for the invitation, Stan.
And thank you for all the people that are doing congratulatory. We took great pride in this event. So thank you.
Thank you. This is awesome.